Do you have gaps in your employment history? On this episode of Driven Too Far, we're discussing the impact your work history has on your application. Hello, I'm Andrew Winkler with Chief Carriers, and this is Driven Too Far, the truth about trucking, a podcast that helps over-the-road truck drivers balance career and family. Hey, welcome back to Driven Too Far. On this episode, we're talking about the importance of your work history on your application. So welcome back again, Mandee Lade. She's our professional recruiter. Welcome you back to the show for what, third, fourth time now? Something like that?
Something like that.
Something we're not keeping track. But Mandee's been a professional recruiter for 7+ years. She's one of the best in the biz. So it's always a pleasure to have her on and get her insights on things. And today I kind of wanted to focus on the work history portion of a driver application, because I know that can be one of the stumbling blocks for drivers, and in a lot of cases, maybe where they get themselves disqualified.
Correct.
So what do you think? What's the biggest problem in the work history section of the app?
Bouncing from job to job, missing employment history, or filling the gaps with what they did.
Okay.
Whether it be like they got into the industry, everything was going great. They had to exit because they had some family issues and had to take a different job just to satisfy what was going on at home. Or, hey, the company just wasn't a good fit for me. Everything that they promised in the beginning didn't work out. It wasn't nothing like what my recruiter told me, and I couldn't do it anymore.
So years ago, when I was in a safety role in a company, one of the things I would always ask, the recruiter would bring the apps to me, hey, she, in this case, she felt like they had a good chance of getting passed through. And it was just kind of a look over from the safety department to, give them the rubber stamp, say, yes, let's move forward. What I think drivers maybe don't know or understand is that whatever you write down for the dates in your work history, who you've worked for in the past, you also have reports you're going to run in the background that can give you that information. So what you end up doing is you take your report against the application and you start to compare the dates. And that's usually where drivers get tripped up.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes I think, honestly, drivers just don't know. If you're trying to think, you have to provide 10 years of work history, right? And maybe you can't remember 7, 8, 9 years ago, the exact month and date you started or quit a certain company. So it's not that unusual for it to be off a month or so here and there. Mm-hmm. But when you start to see a pattern of that and drivers maybe skipping things altogether, what do you do with that stuff?
Well, regardless if it's 20 jobs on there or if it's 4 jobs on there, I just kind of wanted to get in there and look at like what's going on. Why is this driver moving? Or if they have a family, like what's going on? Like, is there something going on that this job just wasn't working out for them and they had to move because they were getting pressure from home? So I look at them like the first job is, I moved out of state. Okay, gotcha. But maybe they went to their dispatch team and they said, hey, we just don't have any loads there, so I can't get you home. So he had to take a different job. So I understand that. Or I had a sick parent and I was now their caretaker and I had to come off the road. I understand that. Or I have a sick kid or things like that. It's where you see the patterns in like, okay, pay, no freight, no miles. And it's like, I stayed here for 30 days and I bounced.
What does that tell you as a recruiter when you start to see that stuff? How do you react to that? Is it somebody you're going to continue the application process with? Do you give them a chance? I mean, do you get them on the phone and talk through it to get their side of the story?
At that time, and then I want to see, like I've already looked through their employment history. I want to see what's going on. Like what's going on? Is this guy a guy that's had a lot of stuff that's happened and, he is genuine in his app and he's trying to give you as much information as possible up front so that you can start to paint the picture? Then I get him on the phone like, okay, what's going on? Tell me what happened here. In the last 10 years, I've seen that you moved 8 times or 15 times. What's doing that? Do you love the industry, but you just have these other hiccups? Or it's just not, the industry is just not, not the right time for you.
Yeah, no kidding. I probably comment as a trucking company leader when I see those kinds of things. There's always things that are going to happen in your life for sure to all of us that require a change and a pivot. But when you see the patterns, like you said, that's a big turnoff. Because as a leader, what I'm thinking about is stability and responsibility. And we want to hire the best drivers we absolutely can that are available in the market. But if that guy's had 8 jobs in 10 years, means he's staying just barely a year anywhere and then he's moving on. So why should I think that our result's going to be any different with him if we bring him on? And is he somebody that we're willing to have for a year and then I'm going to be replacing him again? That's not what we're looking for. That's not what insurance companies want to see either, by the way. They like to see the stability. They want to see you stick with those carriers. So I'm thinking right now of a young man we had in our own fleet. It's probably been a couple years ago. And I think he was from Indiana. I don't know if we were his first trucking job. We were one of his first for sure. Hadn't been in the industry long. So we hired him. Nice young man. Stuck around, I don't know if it was 6 months or a year or something like that. And then he came in with this. It was a story because he was making up stuff that he was either going to work for law enforcement or the FBI or, it felt a little stretched when he was telling us like, well, okay, best wishes to you. And that's fine. If he needs to move on for whatever reason, he didn't have to make up a story. Just tell us, I want to try something different. But the other thing maybe drivers don't know is whenever you apply at a new carrier, that carrier has to do the background checks on you too.
Correct.
And one of those steps is to reach out to your previous employers to verify the dates that you worked at those previous employers. So what we could see is every time this kid has hopped around since he left us, and we got one, was it last week or 2 weeks ago maybe, something came through, and this has got to be his about 6th job in a little over a year.
I want to say it's a little more than that.
It's almost comical.
You're seeing a little more than once a month almost.
Yeah, and what it makes me wonder is why do these other carriers not see this job jumping history? Are they really that desperate to hire drivers out there where they have to consider somebody like that? So,
well, it could be a couple different things. Like they might have a position that they're trying to fill and they think that that gentleman's going to fit the mold and they'll stay.
Yeah.
Or they're saying everything right. And they're like, okay, I want to, give them a chance because they have everything, like clean PSP report, a clean MVR, and they just have the hiccups here in the work history.
They just haven't found the right fit yet.
Correct.
Everything else, their driving record and everything's good. It's clean, but it's just the movement of jobs. And I think we get sucked into that once in a while too, because as a carrier, I think we do a lot of things right and we really strive for it every day. So yes, when somebody's out there bouncing around looking for that right fit, that home, I want to be that for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I get sucked into it a little bit too, thinking we're going to change this person. We're the job they've been looking for type thing. And unfortunately, it doesn't always work like that. The pattern kind of continues.
But you can kind of see it too, most carriers, they're not doing like a driver profile like we do. So you try to mix up the questions a little bit to see if they'll answer the question differently. Or is that information that they're giving you, is it consistent? Have they told you that at the same time, every time that you've asked them about that carrier, or did it now there's a little bit more in things that have been embellished in his story now. So you try to weed out some of the good and the bad and see if you can make it work for them, or if they're going to be a good fit for you, or you're going to be a good fit for them, because it might have been I did a shotgun effect and you were the one carrier that called me back. So I'm just going to go with you for right now.
Yeah. And it was a horrible fit.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what should a driver do? And one of the things I've always recommended to drivers is go to a website, to a carrier that has an online PDF type app and print it out. And it doesn't always matter what carrier it is, because the information that is required on them, it's the same for all carriers. So we all have to ask the same question. So it doesn't matter where you get it. But print it out, fill that out. Take the time to fill that thing out, all your job history, get your dates right. And then just keep that somewhere. So when the time comes for you to apply for a new job, you have an accurate history of your information, and you just whip out that PDF and you can use that for reference. I think that helps drivers tremendously, rather than trying to guess at the dates and you get the dates wrong. And when that stuff starts to happen, especially in that work history part, when things are missing or wrong dates, it throws flags up to the recruiters, and there's a chance.
Digging more.
Yeah, there's a chance that they're probably not going to look that serious at your app. So it's important that you get your app right the first time and as accurate as possible.
Correct. I mean, I can deal with like the couple months off or here or there, I just didn't put it on there because, we left on bad terms. You still have to put it on there. Or I had all these odds and ends jobs but it had nothing to do with trucking. You still have to put it on there.
They want to see the history. They want to see that you've been working the whole time. So even if you jump in and out of trucking and you go take cash jobs because you're a handyman or something like that to fill in, put it on there.
Yep, absolutely.
And the one I think gets drivers that I hear about a lot of times too is they went to work for a company, and they went to orientation and they didn't make it out of orientation. So they think they can skip that on the app, but you shouldn't. It needs to be on there as well.
As soon as you walked in, you did any type of paperwork or accepted a job offer, they have the opportunity to put that on your deck that you came to work and you left.
Yep.
So that's the one thing that I talk about during, like, in the offer letter, like, make sure that, like, if you accept anything, it's now part of your employment history.
Yeah, and it makes me think about the importance of integrity and honesty in the application process for drivers, where while it would be tempting to omit some of those things because you think it makes you look bad, I would much rather talk to a driver that's been honest, has listed everything that they've done on their work history, and then have a conversation of why there's so many jobs or why that work history is like it is.
Yep, I agree. I think it's best to just get it all out front.
If you falsify or if you lie on your application, that's at our company, that's immediate disqualification.
Yeah, or I feel like you're hiding it from me. You don't want me
Right.
to know, and this was a bad thing, and we're just going to keep moving on.
So tell me about a time, one of the things we talk about is I know you like to help drivers be successful, and that's part of your job, right? Tell me about a time where maybe an application or something came in and it was just a hot mess, and you took the time. Have you never been able to do that and then get that driver actually qualified? I mean, tell me about the time you've taken to help them.
Yeah, I mean, just a couple weeks ago, there was a gentleman that he was honest up front. Like, he says, I really like your company. I've been following you guys for quite some time. Everything about what you guys do, just really, I think it fits my mold. And I said, okay, tell me what you've seen, and what's going on with you. Why are you looking now? And so he goes into, I've been in the trucking industry for roughly about 8 years. My employment history is not the best. I've moved around just because of my family. I have a young family at home. My wife stays at home and takes care of my kids, and I am the breadwinner. I'm the person that's supposed to provide for them. And so I've had some struggles where I've worked at places I wasn't getting paid. I was out there for long periods of time. It just wasn't working out. Like, I was in financial difficulty because I wasn't getting paid. And I'm like, okay, what happened there? Like, did you go in and talk to your dispatch? Did you go in and, and take the proper steps? Yep, I went in, I talked to him. I had several conversations with them, and it just wasn't getting any better. So I had to move. And so he had to pick up his whole family and move to a different area because the house that they were living in was just too expensive. Like, basically had to uproot everybody just so that he could survive. And so I'm like, okay, and how did that affect you there? Well, my kids are upset, and now I'm looking for another job because this job didn't work out. My wife is now worried, and I have that in the back of my mind too. So I move again. I get into another company. They tell me that I'm going to be running this route and this type of equipment. I get there, and the equipment is horrible. Like, literally, I could have pushed my foot through the floor of the truck. And I'm like, oh man. He goes, so then at that point, I'm thinking safety. Now, am I going to get home tonight for them? So I can't work there.
Right.
So I'm looking for another job. And I just took this job to get myself by. And it's just a ripple effect, for a couple years. And then he gets to somewhere and they don't have a truck. I'm sitting in orientation in the hotel room. Meanwhile, my family's back at home. I'm not moving. I'm not getting a paycheck. They're not getting what they need at home.
The pressure's building at home because there's no money coming in.
There's nothing coming in. I'm looking again. And so then he gets into another company, stays with them for a couple years, and then they are downsizing their fleet. And he is at the bottom because he's been there for a couple years. They have a lot of longevity. So now he's looking for a job again. And so he's like, I'm trying, to get the right fit, but I'm just not finding it. I try to go local, but I'm not making the money. And now I got to go back over the road. And just listening to his story and him tell me these things, and I haven't even gotten a full application on him yet. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this poor guy, someone needs to help him.
It reminds me of the character in Peanuts with the dark cloud over his head.
Yeah, and that's what he felt. He was like, I felt like I was just taking all this extra weight from everything that's built up the last 5 years, and I'm taking it to my next carrier.
So in that case, because you had the conversation, you could feel there was some truth in his story. It wasn't just made up excuses, to overshadow things, I guess. But did you end up hiring this person?
I did. I ended up hiring him.
And how long has he been there now?
He was just a recent hire. He's been with us for a couple weeks now.
Okay. All right. So time will tell.
Yeah. And he's proven, he's been like, I want to work, give me the loads, do this, do that for me.
I think it's probably a separate conversation, but it's interesting where you could take a scenario like that and have a conversation about this is why it's important to research the hell out of the carriers you're consider going to work for.
Correct.
What would have happened if he could have learned some of those things before he ever stepped foot in those those jobs? He probably wouldn't have taken the jobs and saved himself a lot of grief.
Or even time, just like filling out the application. You would have researched another company that would have been a good fit for you, and you could have put all that effort into that application. Yeah,
and I don't know if that's I feel like, is that the power of marketing and people pushing ads out there that, painting this rosy picture and that's not the case? Or did he come across a recruiter that was really, persuasive, I guess is a good word for that. But there's value in you doing your own
research.
Yes, absolutely. Go talk to other drivers that work there, that have worked there. What is social media saying? What are reviews saying? Now, keep in mind that reviews a lot of times are negative. Those are the people that put the bad experiences out there, not always all the good that happen. So keep that in mind. But what if you came across a carrier that had really good reviews? That's unusual these days. So that's really what you're looking for, is find somebody like that.
But the idea, like when you are looking for a company, is this going to be a fit for me? That's the first thing that you should be looking at. Are they a carrier that's in my area? Are they going to get me home? What kind of freight do they do?
Yes.
That you should be looking at that first. Not looking at like, oh my gosh, they're going to pay me X amount of dollars to come work for me, and I have this and I have that, and oh my God, look at their equipment. You need to look at like, what's the benefit in it for you first? And
we've done some podcasts. These have been a while back, so I don't remember, the names or what episode number they are, but we have done some podcasts that specifically walk drivers through a process of this is how you vet, this is how you research carriers, make a list, make a spreadsheet, ask these questions. We give them, I think we give them 50 questions to ask, if I remember right, because it was probably about recruiting and stuff, so you can cut to the truth and really get in and ask the right questions. And then once you have that, and you have that on 3 or 4 carriers, then you make your choice, because then you've got it all out in front of you and you can see, what's the truth? What are these people really all about?
Well, and the nice thing about it is that you are doing your research, then you're educated on what they're doing. So then when you are calling the recruiter, you can see if they know what's being put out there too as well. Like, how well do they know their company, and how they can be a benefit to me. So that's the whole idea. Like, go out and research them and like see what's going on, and see if you can like figure out like, oh, maybe this is not for me, but what they painted out there is great. So you have to really watch some of that stuff.
Let's get back to kind of the work history conversation and what drivers should or shouldn't do on their application. So I think we've established that write it down, even if it was a one-day orientation and you washed out or you left or whatever that was. What should a driver do if they can't remember the exact dates? Should they write something down close? Should they leave it blank?
No, just put it, I mean, obviously, sometimes we have a hard time remembering what we ate last night, right?
Right.
So just put in a date, like get as close as to what you think it was. And then when we pull your DAC, because that's where these employers report to, then we can get in there and fix it. But you're not hiding it from me. I already know that you know it's there. You just might not have the right date.
You should put a little question mark by it so the recruiter knows that, yeah, I think this is right. They question a little bit.
Yeah.
That way you don't come across as lying or falsifying.
Correct.
Something that hey, I'm making an attempt. This is my best guess, but I'm just not sure it's 100% accurate. So don't omit companies that you've worked for. What should I do if I know I've got to write a company down that I worked for in the past and they're not going to give me a good review?
You still need to write them down. But there's always two sides of the story. So they're going to put what happened or what they think, what happened during your time there. And then you're going to put like, hey, this is what really happened. You can explain it in detail in the little explanation part. And then we can talk about it. So it could be that at that time, it just wasn't a good fit for either one of you guys, or it was like oil and water. And you took the chance to get out of there.
One of the things, I know you do this too, but again, we're always looking for patterns of behavior.
Correct.
Good patterns, bad patterns, whatever it is. But accountability is a big piece, at least for me. So let's say you got a handful of jobs over 10 years, which isn't that unusual. When it asks the reason for leaving, what do you recommend the driver puts down? Is it the dispatcher's fault, the maintenance department's fault, the safety department? What I would caution drivers from doing is pointing the finger all the time. It's always the company's fault, and that's why I left. This is the time you got to look in the mirror and dig deep. Were you part of that? Were you part of the reason it didn't work out? I would much rather see somebody that takes accountability for their own actions in those, and not always pointing the finger, dispatch screwed me over, whatever those things are. But those types of drivers are pretty easy to identify in the application process.
Yes.
And that app's going in the no pile pretty fast.
Well, and it is 50-50. So it's not just one person's fault. It's a joint effort. And how did you guys do to fix it? And that's why I always the funny thing about it is when guys call and they're like, oh my God, this is what's going on with me. I don't have any miles and my paycheck is going into the negative. Okay. Did you go back to dispatch? Did you guys try to work out the issues? Are you trying to solve the problem before you just jump and ship?
Right.
And so I've heard it over the years, like, are you trying to talk me out of coming to work for you? No, I just wanted to see what was your problem solving? Did you guys come to a solution, or was it just like, I gave up?
Because you're never going to walk into a perfect company.
No.
Ever. So you always need that skill set, whether it's communication, problem solving, whatever that is. And if you don't have that, if your reaction is always just to throw the keys and walk out the door and you didn't tell anybody, and all of a sudden that's where those patterns start to come in, and all of a sudden you've got 8 jobs in 10 years kind of thing, because you're not taking responsibility for whatever's going wrong, and it may not be your fault.
Correct.
But you have to be able to go back to somebody you trust in that company and at least start a conversation. Is that going to happen 8 times in 10 years? Probably not. No. I'm going to guess your application would look a lot different if you're having those conversations.
Correct.
Okay, so if we're wrapping up here and kind of looking at a summary of what we just talked about, I think that we established that don't skip over jobs, no
Correct.
matter how short of a term you were there. Do your best to get accurate dates. And maybe that's a question mark by a date if you're unsure. But again, don't falsify your app. That's really what you're trying to do. If you've had a lot of jobs, put them down. You know,
Absolutely.
give yourself an opportunity to at least have the conversation with the recruiter and explain yourself a little bit. Is there anything else you can think of in driver work history and what you really want to see and would recommend to these guys?
I guess always just get out there and do your own research first. Don't waste your time on somebody that's not going to be a good fit for you, that's not going to have any freight in your area, or might not be a good fit for your family. So do your research. It will show in the long run, like I was meant to be here or I wasn't meant to be there. And then also just to make sure that you have, everybody on board at home, like, hey, this is the company we chose together as a family, that this was going to be a good fit for us. So we have to go roll with the punches a little bit, and make sure that we are, ironing out all the ripples within the next 90 days, because you want to give that company at least a good 90 days to get to know you get to know them, before you say, okay, this is just not for me.
That is actually great advice, I think. When you think about your first 90 days at a company, make sure you're identifying and working out those issues early on in your career. Because if you let them go, they're going to build up. There's going to be other things that happen along the way. And pretty soon your bucket's going to be full and overflow, and you just want to get out of there. But if you address that stuff up front, and hopefully it's a situation where maybe it's a miscommunication with operations or safety or whatever that is, maintenance, get it knocked out. Get an understanding between the two parties, and then it's smooth sailing from there. So,
yeah, absolutely. 90 days. Give them at least 90 days.
Yes, fantastic advice. Yep. Thanks for joining us today.
Yep, no problem.
Appreciate you. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Driven Too Far. If you're ready to work for a carrier that puts its people first, check us out at chiefcarriers.com.